A chip smaller than your thumbnail is sitting inside a brake control module in a car rolling off a line in Stuttgart or Detroit. It costs, according to published price sheets from Chinese manufacturers, less than 1 cent. Nobody placed it there as a strategic decision. It arrived because it was the cheapest part that met specification, and nobody was watching that layer of the supply chain. So why is China pouring state capital into making more of these and selling them below the cost curve, instead of chasing the advanced chips everyone says will decide the next decade? That 1 cent microcontroller is the thread that runs through every answer to that question. Before the first answer, a frame. A lock on a door is a signal as much as a barrier. It tells you what is valued enough to seal. The export controls placed on extreme ultraviolet lithography machines and advanced packaging technology told every observer exactly which room the incumbents were guarding. The adjacent rooms, the trailing edge fabs, the mature node capacity were left with the handle loose. China read the same policy map and walked through the unguarded entrance. That is the thesis. Here is why 3 different versions of it matter. So why pour state capital into trailing edge chips and sell them below cost, instead of chasing the advanced nodes everyone says matter? The popular answer is predatory pricing. Flood the market, drive out Texas Instruments and Infineon and ST Microelectronics, claim the volume, then raise prices once the competition has exited. Classic dumping, classic playbook. And the surface data fits. Chinese legacy chip capacity has expanded sharply over recent years. Analysts tracking fab construction report that China now accounts for a substantial and growing share of global mature node wafer capacity, though exact figures vary by source and node definition. On industrial platforms, 8-bit microcontrollers list at prices that Western producers say fall below their own cost of goods. But predatory pricing requires the predator to survive the attrition and then actually raise prices. The historical record for that in semiconductors is poor. Companies that tried it in memory, and there are documented cases in the dynamic random access memory industry going back decades, either drew sanctions, hit overcapacity walls, or found that when they moved to raise prices, competitors re-entered. The dumping frame describes the tactic accurately. It does not explain why a rational actor would run it at this scale, for this long, across this many product categories. That gap is where the second answer lives. So why pour state capital into trailing edge chips and sell them below cost, instead of chasing the advanced nodes everyone says matter? My working hypothesis going into this research was that the dumping story was too simple, and the self-sufficiency story was almost right but missed a lever. The self-sufficiency read goes like this: China's domestic auto industry, its grid infrastructure, its appliance manufacturing, all of it runs on mature node chips. The strategic lesson of the 2020 and 2021 global chip shortage, when automakers worldwide shut production lines over a lack of components priced in single-digit dollars, was burned into Chinese industrial policy. Never be held hostage to a foreign supplier for the parts your physical economy cannot run without. Our 1 cent microcontroller is the chip in the electric vehicle brake module, the chip in the smart meter, the chip in the motor controller of every air conditioner. Build the capacity at home. China's stated semiconductor development plans have consistently named legacy nodes as a priority, alongside leading-edge ambition. Reports from analysts covering Chinese fab investments suggest the bulk of announced capacity additions in recent years have targeted 28 nanometer and above, the mature nodes that supply automotive, industrial, and consumer electronics demand. The self-sufficiency argument is well documented and internally coherent, but it explains why you build the capacity. It does not explain why you then export aggressively below cost into Western markets. A self-sufficiency play is inward-facing. What Chinese producers are doing is outward-facing. selling into global supply chains at prices that undercut incumbents on their home turf. That behavior needs a different explanation. The self-sufficiency frame is necessary, but not sufficient. So why pour state capital into trailing edge chips and sell them below cost, instead of chasing the advanced nodes everyone says matter? The real mechanism is about who sets the price floor for the physical economy. Think of a city's infrastructure. The glass towers downtown are what you photograph, but the pipes, the wiring conduit, the load-bearing bolts, those are what the towers rest on. Control the bolt supply, and you have leverage over every building in the city, however tall it gets. Trailing edge chips are the bolts. Advanced logic is the skyline. This is where the argument shifts from documented fact towards structural inference. And I want to be clear about that boundary. The documented part, trailing edge chips by unit volume, dwarf leading edge chips by an overwhelming margin. The overwhelming majority of chips shipped globally, measured by unit count, are mature node devices. That is not disputed. The inference, and this is my synthesis, not a conclusion any single analyst has stated outright, is that price-setting power at that volume layer is a form of industrial leverage that does not appear in the leading-edge benchmarks everyone is watching. Try to render the volume physically. If you stacked every advanced logic chip shipped in a year, the column would be, by unit count, a small fraction of the tower you would build from legacy chips shipped in the same period. The advanced chip is the headline. The legacy chip is the page it is printed on. A single rivet is not impressive. But if one supplier controls the price of every rivet in global manufacturing, that is not a commodity position. It is a structural one. If Chinese fabs are the ones setting the global reference price for the microcontrollers in every car, every grid controller, every appliance, then they own a lever that no leading edge node can replicate. Leading edge is a prestige layer. Trailing edge is the foundation. Now, I want to push back on that answer because I think intellectual honesty requires it. The bull case is that trailing edge demand is structural. Electric vehicles, grid modernization, expanding appliance connectivity in emerging markets. These are long-duration trends, not cyclical blips. If demand stays high, Chinese producers who own the price floor own a durable position. Texas Instruments and Infineon face a margin squeeze calibrated against cost structures built for a different price environment. The bull case says this is not a glut. It is a permanent reset of who sets the reference price. The bear case is that a chip glut is still a glut. Subsidized overcapacity that does not earn its cost of capital is a drain, not a weapon. Western governments have noticed. The European Union and the United States have both initiated or accelerated tariff and trade remedy investigations into legacy chip imports. If tariffs wall off Western markets and electric vehicle growth slows simultaneously, Chinese fabs could find themselves holding capacity built for a demand curve that moved. A cash-burning fab is not leverage. It is a liability. I think the bet on trailing edge dominance is probably right over a decade, but I would not call it certain. Cheap volume is leverage only if the demand outlasts the subsidy. And right now, no independent data exists sufficient to say with confidence which side of that line we are on. No publicly verified cost per wafer benchmarks for Chinese legacy fabs have been confirmed. Company claims and analyst estimates diverge. The dependency argument assumes Western supply chains do not resource, and some evidence of resourcing efforts does exist, though the scale and speed remain unclear. That honest uncertainty is also why the question I started with turned out to be the wrong question. That realization changed how I read every capacity announcement that followed. The question, is China dumping chips, frames this as a trade violation story, a pricing behavior that tariffs and trade filings can correct. But the tariff is not the point. The point is what the capacity represents after the tariff. The better question is, what does an economy become when one country owns the cheap layer everything else is built on? The answer is that it becomes dependent in ways that do not show up in any single product's import data, because the dependency is in the price floor, not in any specific component. Our 1-cent brake module microcontroller is not the story. The system that now prices around it is the story. Read the export controls backward. They show you which room was locked. They also show you which room was not. The trailing edge layer was left undefended. Whether by oversight or by miscalculation is a question the incumbents have not yet answered publicly. And I think that answer matters more than any individual tariff rate. That cent-priced microcontroller in the brake module is still there. Nobody moved it. And the next one, in the next model year, will probably arrive from the same place at a lower price. The advanced chip is the headline. The trailing edge chip is the ground it is printed on. And right now, one country is deciding what that ground costs. Here is what I want to know from you. If your company sources legacy chips, or if you work in automotive or industrial supply chains, have you seen the price pressure from Chinese suppliers in your own procurement? Tell me what you are actually seeing at the component level, because that data is not in any analyst report I have found. And if you want the next layer of this, how the West is responding, and whether the policy tools it has actually fit the problem it is facing, subscribe and turn on notifications, because that is the next case to crack.